Hello and welcome to this video in the series that is all about empowering a league of extraordinary mothers on how to lay a strong foundation for health and happiness in your teenage girls. My name is Edwina Murphy-Droomer and today I am interviewing Dr. Justin Coulson. Justin is a parenting, relationships and happiness expert. He's graduated with first-class honours in psychological science and completed his PhD researching parenting and happiness. Justin has been a psychology lecturer and tutor and has had his research published in academic journals and peer-reviewed books. You may well be familiar with Dr. Coulson from his appearances in the media, including the Today Show, Today Extra, The Morning Show on 7, The Daily Edition, and The Project. He also provides radio commentary on ABC Radio, Radio National, and in various newspapers, magazines, and blogs as a parenting expert. Justin is one of the key voices at kidspot.com.au. For over 15 years, Justin has been providing happiness, relationship, and parenting training to parents, teachers, and the corporate sector. He has presented in hundreds of schools for a variety of other organisations as well. But perhaps most importantly and pertinent to today's conversation, Justin and his wife Kylie are the parents of 6 girls. Justin, welcome and thank you so much for being here.
It's really nice to talk to you, Edwina.
So what ages are your girls?
Our eldest is at the would you just move out of home age, and our youngest is would you stop destroying our home? So the baby's 3.5, nearly 4, and our eldest is 18. She's at uni now, and well, she's a grown up. She's an adult, and it feels wonderful to be watching, this daughter of ours do great things with her life. It's exciting.
Yeah, my eldest was 18 in November, but he's in year 12, and so I think because he's still at school, I'm not quite grabbing onto the adult theme, even though he is driving. So it's a big shift, isn't it?
Yeah, it really is. It's almost, in some ways, there's a bit of letting go. There's a bit of grieving that happens when your kids get old enough to live their own lives. As a husband and wife, Kylie and I have been married for around 20 years now, and we've gone through this process where we've had to just sort of say, well, it's your life. When she comes to me and she says, but Dad, I need some money for this, for the car, for uni, for whatever it might be. I'll say, well, that's going to be challenging for you then, isn't it? Yeah, it's a totally different situation for her and for us. I want to go out this weekend, Dad. Is that okay? Well, it's up to you. Yeah, but I've got to work the next day and I'm wondering, hey, it's your life. It's just a great opportunity for us to grow as parents again and this is the thing about parenting, like you never stop growing, you never stop learning, you never stop needing to adapt or change because every child and every age brings new growth, new opportunities, new learning.
And it's amazing reflecting on, because I don't have any memories particularly of being, even in primary school, I don't have a lot of memories from those years, but I have very strong memories of being a teenager. So as my girls who are 14 and 16 are going through this stage, I can reflect pretty clearly on where I was at that stage and my thoughts. And, there's not too many things that they can say that shock me.
Yeah, just wait.
Yeah, it's coming.
Just wait. Yeah, it's kind of like back pain or joint pain. Eventually it'll catch up to you.
Yeah. I don't doubt it. Look, I know that we could talk for days, but I'm very aware that you have a limited amount of time and these interviews are only 45 minutes. And I've got a few things that I think lots of mums, including myself, are going to really have some burning questions around. And one of the biggest things that seems to be coming up over and over again is addressing anxiety. We seem to have this generation of girls that are barely able to leave their homes, let alone their rooms, and often aren't even able to get to school because anxiety is so crippling. So I would love to look at, your thoughts on where this is coming from, why it's escalating so quickly and what we do about it.
It's a big question and we don't have time to address it all in detail today, but let's talk about a few things at a superficial level and see if see if we can add some value to the lives of parents who are struggling with this, because it's an all too real challenge.
Yep.
The first thing, I guess, is where's it coming from? Research tells us that, and until last year or the year before, it was expected that depression was going to be the #1 cause of a global disease burden. It seems like that's starting to shift towards anxiety, particularly with young people and particularly with young girls. And as you've said, there's this shift where they just want to stay in their room.
Yeah.
And cradle their screen. I call it their precious. If you've seen Lord of the Rings, you know, Gollum has his precious. If you
Great.
your teenage daughter into Gollum, just try and take a screen off her. And she's like, no, the wicked parent says they've taken the precious. It's just,
yes.
They're so compelled to use it. One of my kids spent some time interstate with a friend of hers.
Yep.
And when she got there, she found that this friend was really distant, really detached, didn't seem to know how to communicate particularly well, would disappear and just leave her in the bedroom or leave her in the living room for half an hour or an hour at a time, just constantly on the phone, really not communicating and relating well. When my daughter got to the airport to say goodbye and jump on a plane and fly home, her phone started going, you know, messages everywhere. And it was this friend saying it was so good to be with you, had such a great time with you, wish we could have spent more time together. And my daughter's kind of like, but I was right there and you didn't talk to me for 3 whole days. I mean, it was a really hard 3 days. And all of a sudden there's this nonstop communication. This same person, at the age of 17, old enough to drive a car, but didn't want to get a license, too fearful, wouldn't go and get a job, struggled through school because of anxiety. And the more parents that I talk to who have got teenage daughters, the more I'm hearing about these anxiety challenges. Yeah. Where's it coming from? It's hard to say. I think that let's be real. I want to be very kind to parents here, but I can't help but think that the way we're raising our kids has got something to do with it. I don't believe that we need to be toughening our kids up. But at the same time, I don't think that we need to be catching them every time that they fall and making sure that there is nothing in their way so that they never encounter difficulty. Yep. I'm a keen bike rider. I love to ride a bicycle. I'm not that guy in Lycra that gets in the way when you're on the road and you're like, oh, for goodness sakes, can't you just ride somewhere else? That's me right there. And the reason that I share that is because if I want to become a stronger cyclist, riding downhill isn't going to help me. I've got to ride uphill, or at least I've got to ride along the flat and push myself as hard as I can. Yeah. And it's the same with our kids and their resilience muscles, I guess. They need to be allowed to encounter the hardships that life presents. It doesn't mean that we should look for hardships and heap them on them. It doesn't mean that if they struggle, we should say, your life, you figure it out. I mean, once they're adults, that's a different story. But when they're young, doesn't mean that we're supposed to walk away and just say, oh, come on, drink some concrete and harden up, which is what I hear some parents say now and then. It doesn't mean that when we've got a child who's struggling and who's emotional that we should simply say, would you just get over it? Yep. Because that kind of an approach will also create anxiety. What it means, though, instead is, I don't know if you remember when you were in primary school and you were doing gymnastics and they had that balance beam. Yep. And you had to walk along the balance beam and try and not fall off. And they had the mats underneath the balance beam so that if you fell, you'd have a soft landing. But usually, at least in the school that I went to, there were 2 volunteers that had to walk beside you with their arms outstretched like this. Now, if you fall, that person is not going to catch you, but they are going to be able to tip you back onto the beam. Yeah. Or they're going to be able to at least slow your fall or make the fall a little less uncomfortable than it might have been. Yeah. This is the approach that we need to have as parents with our children. We need to acknowledge that they're on a balance beam and that they're going to tip too far one way or the other. Our job is not to let them fall on the ground so that they learn their lessons. That's bad for resilience. It's bad for anxiety. It'll make them anxious next time they get on the beam. Yeah. But our job also is not to catch them and cradle them and walk across the beam while we carry them. That's not going to help them either. They've got to learn how to develop those muscles. And so as they tip, as they get anxious, as they get worried, as they fail, our job is to reach out and say, it's a long way down to the safety mat on the ground, but if I just give you a little nudge here, I can tap you back onto the beam. You're the one that's got to cross the beam. Yeah. And this is something that parents struggle with because we just want to protect our kids. I hear parents say all the time, I don't want them to go through what I had to go through.
Yeah.
Which to me, if I put on a slightly nasty, judgmental skew of this, is like saying, I don't want them to grow like I've had to.
Yeah.
If we deny them growth opportunities, then they won't be able to grow into the humans that they have the potential to become. Yeah. So when it comes to anxiety, Edwina, we need to acknowledge that it is very real and it's very hard to deal with. And it's crippling in some cases, but more often than not, by simply being there for our kids and saying, we understand, now, what are you going to do about it? Or, I understand, now how can I help you? We empower our children to overcome their own anxieties. That's crucial. Now, I recognize that most people who are listening to or watching what we're discussing now don't have psychology degrees and are not equipped to do therapy with their kids. And even if you were, you wouldn't do therapy with your own kids anyway. But I want to share my screen because when we had a very brief conversation before we started chatting, I mentioned to you that I had a bunch of things that I could share that are helpful to deal with anxiety for parents. So you don't have to have psychological qualifications to be able to deal with this. You just have to be a parent who cares about your kids. So you should be able to see my screen. If you're viewing this, the screen should be up. And the first thing that we can do is emphasize how mindfulness matters. So if a person's anxious, they're not focused on here and now. They're focused on the future. And they're creating a negative future in their mind. So as a parent, if I have a child who's becoming anxious, what I want to do is I want to bring them back to here and now. The phrase that I use is, be where your feet are. Be right here. If your feet are here, your head should be here as well. If we're becoming anxious, our feet are here, but our head is, at tomorrow or at the meeting or at the thing that we're worried about. Yeah. So when we become mindful, or when we help our children to become mindful, here's what we do. We say to them, I can see how this is starting to concern you. Let's just come back to right here, right now. Tell me what you can see in the room right now, or tell me what you can see out the window. Let's just focus on what our senses are telling us. What do you see? What can you touch? What are you touching right now? What are your feet feeling? What's your backside, or you're resting against the mattress or against the chair? What are you feeling? What do your clothes feel like? Let's bring you right back here. What do you see? What do you feel? What can you hear? What can you smell? What can you taste? And by bringing them back into the moment, we can reduce the anxiety. Our kids are no longer going to be anxious, and they're going to be focused on right here. It can almost become, at the risk of getting a little bit woohoo, it can become a little bit meditative. Yep. And it's not woohoo anymore, because science 20 years ago said that meditation was all, mindfulness, mumbo jumbo kind of crazy stuff. And now the research is in, and it tells us how powerful this can be. Let me give you another couple of ideas. The second one, this is my favorite. I don't know why, but I resonate with it so much. Imagine that you're sitting on a grassy bank beside a river and you see a leaf floating down the river. That's kind of what our thoughts are. Our thoughts are just leaves floating down a river. And as we see that leaf come around the corner over here to our left or our right, and it floats down in front of us, and then it goes down and around another corner and it disappears. And if we can help our children to understand that their thoughts are just like leaves, they come and they go. If I'm having an anxious thought right now, I shouldn't actually try to fight it, because what you resist persists. Yeah. The more you try to push it away, the more it encroaches into your thinking. And so say to your kids, imagine that your thoughts are just like this leaf in a river, and it's going to come and then it's going to go. And that's just fine. Let the thought be there, but don't dwell on it. Just watch it float by and watch it disappear. And if it comes back because the river's circular, like at those theme parks where you sit in the floaty thing and you go around in circles, that's fine too. The thought will come back from time to time. And when it arrives, say, I'm having that thought now, and it's going to go away soon. Research suggests that when we take this, this is something of a mindfulness approach as well. When we take this approach, we tend not to feel as though our thoughts are going to destroy us. They're going to come and then they're going to go, and that's fine. The third idea, if you've got a teenage girl, there's a chance that she's going to experience a sense of perfectionism. I don't know if you've seen this with your kids, Edwina, but they've just got to be perfect. They've got to have it right. And let's face it, social media is part of the villain here. If I've got to take 45 selfies and experiment with 23 different filters before I can finally say, this is the one I want to put on my Instagram feed, then I've got a perfectionistic problem. You know, I'm heading in an unhealthy direction. And I know that kids are pretty cool with Snapchat because you can goof off and the snaps get deleted and they can have funny filters and it's all about a really raw experience. And kids seem to differentiate between the two. But when it comes to Instagram and Facebook, there's a real challenge there. Research tells us that Instagram is the #1 app or platform for creating anxiety and stress and depression for our kids, our teenagers. Why? Because it's all about appearances and it's all about perfection. So how do we get our kids to let go of perfectionism? I think the best thing that they can do is get rid of Instagram and social media more generally. Good luck having that conversation with your teenage daughter. But I think that it's a worthwhile conversation to have. I had a conversation with a mum just yesterday of a 17-year-old girl, and she said that she's decided to drop her social media. It's taken her years to come to this decision, but she's discovered that while ever she's comparing herself to others, she realizes that she's never going to be good enough. And that's what social media teaches. It's all about comparison, competition, and being enough. She's actually a great kid. As they all are. But social media is making her feel like she can never be perfect. She can never be good enough. It's only been a day, and I don't know how she's going with it, but I can't help but think, based on the science that's around, that when we let go of social media, we can let go of perfectionism. And you know, Edwina, this applies to mums as well.
Absolutely.
You don't have to compare yourself to that woman on Instagram who had a baby 5 weeks ago and now has her pre-baby body back 5 weeks post-baby. It's not a fair comparison. Don't do it to yourself.
And I think that, you know, the parenting world is rife with comparison and competitive and judgment and shame. And I think as mums and how we handle all that, we're setting an example within that whole realm of judgment and comparison.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And parenting was never meant to be a competitive sport, which brings me to my fourth idea. If you're really dealing with anxiety with teenage girls, focus on your relationship. Spend time with your daughter, and make sure that dad does as well if he's in the picture and if he's available. So important that kids have got strong relationships with parents who are willing to listen to them and talk to them. So go out for brekkie once a week or once a fortnight. Go on a daddy-daughter camp. Just disappear for the weekend and go to the coast or go into the mountains. Go somewhere for 48 hours. Pack a tent, pack a couple of sleeping bags, take your pillow because you're going to be sorry without your pillow, and have these experiences with the kids where you're just building your relationship. There's no agenda. It's just time together. The kids who have got the strongest relationship with their parents, trusting relationships where they're happy to talk about stuff, tend on average to have less anxiety and less stress in their lives than others. This fifth, and I've only got 7, so we're nearly done. This fifth idea is thoughts are thoughts, not facts. Just because you think it doesn't make it true. Our kids have got to understand this. Just because they think something, it doesn't mean that it's reality. You can change your thoughts and you can change your life. You can change your reality just by shifting the way you're looking at things. So I think that if you're dealing with anxiety, that's a helpful one. Something that I was really interested to discover a couple of years ago with some research done by a guy called Todd Cashton out of George Mason University in the United States is that one of the best cures for anxiety is curiosity. So if you're nervous about something, if you're anxious about something, if it worries you, instead of moving away from it, move towards it. Try to uncover what it is about it that makes you nervous. What bothers you about it? What's causing this crippling feeling? And the closer you can get to it, the more you can explore it and learn about it, the more you might actually discover that you don't need to be anxious at all.
Right. Oh, that's interesting.
The final of the 7 ways to conquer anxiety. Oh, sorry. Yeah. So the final thing that I recommend is to normalize anxiety. Every single person gets anxious. Every single person gets worried. every single person has experiences that make them think that they're not good enough and they're not going to be able to do it. And there's for those who are sharing the screen and who can see this, what we want kids to know is that there is actually an optimal level of anxiety. If you woke up in the morning and you had no anxiety, no arousal whatsoever, you wouldn't get out of bed. You'd be comatose. You wouldn't be able to do anything. We have to have a certain level of arousal and anxiety, a certain level of stress to get moving, to do anything. Anxiety only becomes a problem once we go beyond that optimal amount. And so the 6 strategies that I've just shared can be helpful ways to reduce anxiety or to keep anxiety at what we would call the optimal level.
Yeah. That's all really useful. And I find that with my kids, with my girls particularly, that finding those moments to connect where there's no screen involvement, so it's not sitting watching TV or a movie together, but rather is to bring them back to that kind of connected place, whether it's just getting them to give me a hand making dinner, or whether it's when we're driving in the car somewhere. It opens up all those possibilities for conversation and just to hear what's going on in their days, making sure that there's no screens at the dining table, so that when we sit to eat dinner, or we do a cooked breakfast in our house every morning because it's a time to sit and make sure that we've got all the things that we need for the day ahead, and make sure all the forms are filled out and everybody's, set for the day ahead. And those little pockets of routine connections, I think, make a massive difference in our house.
Yeah, they do. And let me emphasize as well, nature is fuel for the soul. Yeah. More time outside in relationships is a powerful way to overcome nerves and to build relationships and help us to reconnect to what it is to be a human. No Instagram filters required. Just enjoy being outside together.
I think that connection time is a really interesting one that I'm observing with my kids and my girls particularly, is when they go to friends' house for the weekend or for sleepovers, they seem to disappear into their rooms and they're just all on their screens. It just doesn't seem to be that they connect the way that we used to. And I just, that is just gives me great cause for concern. I get so worried about that. And then I step into that trying to control the situation, which I know doesn't particularly help.
Yeah, not usually. We're those weird parents who, when all the kids arrive at our place for a sleepover or even for a play date, we explain that we're so excited to have them, and we've got a general, minimize screens policy. Let's just keep screens off. And so during the day, we're like, whatever, just do whatever you're doing, but be outside, go places, go for walks, go for a bike ride, go and do something. But certainly in the evenings, once they're heading off to the bedroom or to the media room or whatever it might be, we'll actually say, look, if you're worried and you need your phone because you want to contact your parents, we don't want to make you uncomfortable. However, we don't want screens in rooms. We don't want screens keeping you up all night. And so we've got this wonderful box just here. Why don't you pop your screens in there? You can charge them in there so they're fully charged for the morning. And if you need them, come and get them. We're not keeping them from you. And then we padlock it, of course. No, I'm just kidding. And so we get them connecting with each other. And most of the time, every now and again, there's a child who's really resentful of it. But invariably, with only the smallest exception now and then, the kids respond really well to it, and they have a fun time because of it. I think as parents, we're bold enough sometimes. We need to actually say, look, I'm the parent. I know it's good for you, and we want you guys to have a fun time, so give us your screens.
Yeah, perfect. So look, this, the mums that'll be tuning into this, so we'll have teenagers that range, anywhere from 14 to 18 and a bit beyond. And, I know in my girls developmentally, they seem to go through such different stages. And so I think it's useful if we can have a look a little bit at how you break those stages up and things that we might see in those stages, or, is there periods where you can expect a little bit more antagonism or the slam door syndrome, those kind of things, and how we sort of look at the different stages of parenting teenage girls. I know year 9 is traditionally a year where they go through this massive sort of Is it a separation that they want to do, where their peers become so much more important than their parents in shaping their thoughts and their desires and their wanting to fit in? If we can, look at those stages a little bit, Justin.
It's an interesting question. I get asked about stages quite a lot.
Yeah.
And there are some developmental psychologists and people who study adolescence who will say, yes, we can break it into these discrete stages.
Mm-hmm.
My preference is to look at development as a continuum rather than a discrete stage, because while there are some things that do have to happen at a certain period, most of those things tend to be in the very, very young years. Once we hit adolescence, kids are developing at different times in different ways for a variety of different reasons. And so my interest is perhaps what's happening during this period generally, rather than saying, well, look, in year 9, this is going to happen. At the age of 15, this is where it all goes crazy. Or, once they're 17, look out because they're independent. We can draw some very broad general brushstrokes, but there are going to be some people who will say, well, you're saying 17, but for me that happened at 13. And so what I would probably suggest is a more holistic way of looking at it is to say, let's just talk about the general developmental changes that are occurring during adolescence for our girls. And we can talk about a few averages here and there. So there are a couple of central tasks of adolescence. And if children cannot navigate these tasks, then they tend to struggle in the next phase of life as they become young adults. And the central task is that they need to work out who they are. They need to develop their identity. Now, you and I probably know this already, but identity development is a lifelong process. I'm developing now in my 40s my identity in ways that I never would have thought possible. I thought once you became an adult, that's just who you were. But our identities continue to evolve and continue to develop. During adolescence, though, this is a crucial time for identity development because our kids start asking themselves, well, who am I really? What am I really on about? What do I really believe? What do I genuinely value? And how do my values align with those things that my parents have taught me? The second interrelated component of adolescent development is that if I'm going to form my own identity, the easiest way for me to do that, the course of least resistance, that might be not the right phrase, but the easiest way for me to work out who I am is to fight against something, which is usually going to be parents. So when my parents say something, for me to work out who I am, I can either go along with it or I can fight against it. And fighting against it just kind of makes more sense because as I fight against it, I get to feel a sense that I'm in charge of me. I'm making my own decisions, which makes parenting these kids at this age terribly challenging. And this will usually start somewhere around about the age of 2. I'm just kidding. It'll usually start somewhere. I know some people are thinking, my kid's always been like that. But it really kicks in normally in typically developing Western adolescents around about the age of 13 or 14. And it goes through until usually around about the age of 21 or 22. Sometimes a little earlier, sometimes a little later. And so we go through this, let's say 5, 6, 7 year process where our kids are pushing back. They're trying to work things out for themselves. They're saying no because they want to try that on. They're hanging out with, and this is the other challenge that we face. Peers become primary. We're no longer the central influence. And again, that kicks off around about grade 8-ish. For some kids, it starts younger, around grade 5. Other kids, it might not happen until they're 16 or 17. But usually somewhere around grade 8, peers really become the central. I mean, if you've ever had a teenager say to you, but I don't want to go on this family holiday because what am I going to miss out on with my friends? They don't want to leave their friends behind. And they know that they're going to have a great time on the family holiday, but they're scared that their friends are all going to get together and there's going to be something pivotal happen in their friendship group that's going to cause the friendship group to gel and bond in a way that they'll miss out on, and then they won't be part of whatever's gone on there. So that's what's happening, I guess, at a psychological level for our kids. At the same time, that's what's happening at a social level. And neurologically, there are some really important developments happening. Now, most people have heard that the teenage brain is not fully mature. Neurologically, there's still some growth and development that needs to happen.
Yeah.
And the thing that really makes us human is this thing right here above our eyebrows, behind our forehead, called our prefrontal cortex.
Yeah.
For adolescents, that prefrontal cortex is still developing. It's not mature. This is quite interesting. Most people think that there's not enough brain cells there. There's actually too many.
Yeah.
And the prefrontal cortex needs to get rid of the brain cells. It needs to prune away the ones that aren't being used. And then it needs to myelinate the brain cells that are left. Now, what this essentially means is that there's a whole lot of grey matter and needs to get rid of some of that. And the white matter goes around the grey matter. And it's kind of like insulation. That's what myelin is. That's what myelination is. And the reason we need myelin around our brain cells is because it makes the signals travel faster and more directly.
Yeah.
If you think about an electrical cable, we have insulation around our electrical cables because without it, the electrical signal would just diffuse into the environment. Yeah. And it would also travel quite slowly. The insulation around the cable makes it go from one place to another really quickly and keeps it directed and focused. Yeah. And so our teenagers are actually starting to go through this process in their brain where the prefrontal cortex operates inefficiently because there's not enough myelin and there's too many brain cells.
Yeah, okay. Yeah.
The problem for teenagers is in the middle of their brain, there's this thing that we'll call it the emotional center of their brain. It's the limbic system. Yeah. It's the amygdala, the hippocampus, there's a whole lot of fancy names that we probably don't need to memorize right now. And so the limbic system is really fired up and ready to go. We're red hot. You know, the emotional center of the brain, if you've had a teenager for more than a minute, you know that they can get very emotional very fast. Yeah. And so their limbic system doesn't communicate well with their prefrontal cortex. The prefrontal cortex realizes that the limbic system is getting very agitated, very excited, very emotional. And it's sort of saying, you know what? I know that we need to think about this. Yep. I know that I need to make a decision up here because this is where all the decisions happen in the prefrontal cortex. This is the planning and the strategy and the recognizing consequences. Yep. And it's going, I know that if I get too emotional right now, there's going to be consequences. What will they be and what should I do? It's going to take too long. Let's just do it anyway. Yep. Because the limbic system's in charge. It's just going, whoa, like this. Now, it doesn't have to be like that, but the more emotional our teenagers become, the more the prefrontal cortex doesn't work. And so all of these changes are happening for our teenagers, and our challenge is to help them to stay balanced so they don't get too emotional, so they don't make silly decisions. Yeah. The other challenge that we've got, if you bring all of this together, is that teenagers, when they're around their peers, they get much more emotional and much faster. Their peers rev them up. So studies show that if children are doing experiments with their friends, they tend not to get too revved up by it. If adults are doing it, no problem. But when you've got teenagers with their friends, they take more risks. They take bigger risks. They become more emotional. They don't activate their prefrontal cortex so well. Okay. So to go back to your question, in terms of ages and stages and what's happening during adolescent development, they're separating from us. They're heading towards their peers. They're becoming very emotional. They're not thinking through the consequences of what's going on. They've got all these neurological, psychological, and social changes that are causing them to be influenced by people who don't see the world quite as clearly as we do, and therefore putting themselves at risk of making less helpful, less healthy decisions. Yeah.
So to bring that to into a practical sense, so that decision making, that rebellion, all those stages. So when your daughter decides that she wants to put on a push-up bra and teeny tiny shorts and walk out the door, and she's 14 and looks 18 or 21, what is the line between allowing her to express herself, allowing her to create her own identity, and not buying into the kind of the body shaming or embarrassing conversations? I think as mums, those kind of practical tools on how to address these kind of things is, bringing all those bits together, because as soon as you go, you can't wear that, then, tick, job done, off she goes.
Yeah. So repeat after me. You're not going out in that.
You're not going out in that.
Okay, wipe that from your vocabulary.
Yeah.
Never say it again. That's the one and only time you're allowed to say it. Force creates resistance.
Yeah.
Force creates resistance. The more you try to tell a teenager that they can't do something, the more that emotional part of their brain fires up.
Yeah.
Prefrontal cortex becomes subdued. It can't work it out. They look at what their peers are doing. They look at what's happening on social media. They want to separate from us. They want to form their own identity, and they'll do exactly what you tell them not to do.
Yeah.
Now, that doesn't mean that we should go down to the shops and buy them a whole lot of clothing that they shouldn't wear, because reverse psychology won't work here either, okay? Oh, look at all those clothes. Wear whatever you want, sweetheart. Not going to happen, okay?
Yeah.
What we need to do instead is we need to begin the conversation well before they become adolescents.
Yeah.
And the conversation goes like this. You know what? When you see somebody, you know, you're 9 years old, when you see those girls dressed up like that, how does it make you feel? What do you think that they're saying to other people when they wear those clothing? What do you think your clothing says to other people? How can we wear clothing that shows that we take pride in our appearance and in our bodies? Now, this is coming from the values that I'm hearing from you, because not every parent, not every mum's going to feel the same way. I know plenty of mums who feel very, very comfortable wearing attire that others might say is far too immodest and far too revealing. But they feel good when they wear that. They feel comfortable, and that's who they feel that they are. So I want to make sure that this is a judgment-free zone.
Absolutely.
I want to address the specific thing, because I know that while there are many parents who have those feelings, there are also a lot of parents, because they come to me and they say exactly what you've just said, Edwina. I want my kids to dress modestly or to take pride in their appearance. And let's be clear, I've had one or two or three or more mums come to me and say, I don't want my child walking out the door looking like a hussy. And so, judgment or not, there are very real concerns about how do we make this happen. And so the conversation...
I think where I'm coming from with this conversation is that I think it was Steve Biddulph who said that 14 is the new 18. And it's not a judgment so much as, you know, whether or not these girls look absolutely beautiful, because they are absolutely beautiful. It's the putting themselves in a position of dealing with the tension that they're probably, you know, not really equipped to deal with yet. And it's coming from that angle, you know, trying, it's difficult to put it into the terms that, you know, emotionally I feel, but trying to allow and create a space for our 14-year-olds, 15-year-olds to be 14 or 15 rather than to be 18 or 19, 20, you know, it's all wrapped up in that, allowing them to developmentally be where they are and not have to deal with perhaps things that they're not quite emotionally ready for.
Yeah, beautifully put. And I love the way Steve says that. And I think that you've summarised it really nicely. Regardless of our motivations, what we want is we want our 14-year-olds to dress like 14-year-olds. And that becomes the challenge. So I believe that we want to pre-arm our kids while they're young. In fact, even before they're young, if we go back to having little kids, we want to cocoon our little kids. We want to bubble wrap them. They don't need to be on Instagram. They don't need to be watching R-rated movies. There's a lot of things that they don't need. They don't need to be dressing certain ways or whatever. We cocoon them. But as they get older, we want to start pre-arming them. And the way we pre-arm them is we say, you're about to go into grade 3. And in grade 3, you're going to notice that some of the kids are going to start doing X, Y, and Z. You're about to go into grade 5, and you're going to see that the kids are starting to do this or do that, or dress like this, or feel a certain way. Or you're about to go into grade 7 or grade 8, and you're going to, you know, the kids are going to start drinking alcohol. Or, you know, grade 8, some of them are going to start trying other substances. Some of them in grade 8 are going to start experimenting sexually. Some of them will experiment a little bit. Some of them will experiment a whole lot. And what we do is we have this conversation. We let the kids know that these are normal things that kids are going to be interested in and are going to be trying out. And then we say to our children, what do you think would be the best way to deal with this if you encounter it? So we get them to essentially set their own limits. And if they are stuck, then we can guide them to limits that we think are appropriate based on our personal values and preferences within our family. This means that by the time they become teenagers, by the time they get to about 14, we should have had, ideally, in a perfect world, a half a dozen years of these kinds of conversations with them. And so as they get into the age of around 14 and they walk out the door and they look like they're 21 and we're saying, hang on, you're just 14. We don't want that 19-year-old boy in the shopping centre to be staring at you and checking you out and making lewd comments towards you. We want you to feel comfortable and safe. How do we have that conversation with them? Well, this is where we begin to defer to them, but we do it in a reasoned way. And so we might say, just before you go, I notice what you're wearing. When you walk into the shops, there are going to be some people who notice you. How would you feel if, that pervy, weird 43-year-old starts checking you out with what you're wearing? Are you comfortable with that kind of attention? We just want to, we want to keep you safe. We want you to not feel uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And then once we've had a conversation, we say, well, what do you think is the best thing to do? Do you feel comfortable wearing that? Because it might be perfectly appropriate attire in one setting, but not in another.
Yeah.
And so we want to develop that conversation. By the way, as they're walking out the door, it's usually not the best time to have that conversation. It's usually better to have that conversation a couple of hours earlier.
Yeah. And I think, for most of the mums that are going to be tuning into this, are already going to be having teenage girls and may not have had those conversations through the primary years. But I think that it's probably a fair thing to say that you can have those conversations anyway. How are you going to feel about the reactions
Yeah. The sooner we start, the better. And if we haven't started sooner, let's start tonight. Let's go out and have some churros or some fancy desserts, some waffles and ice cream, and say, hey, I've been thinking, I listened to this thing today, and we've never really talked about the whole sex thing. We've never really talked about alcohol and other substances. Yeah. We've never really talked about contraception and what our values are around intimacy and that kind of thing. Yeah. The other thing to remember with these conversations, and this is something that I think is so important, Edwina, is it's usually best to not just come straight in at your child and say, what have you been doing? Here's my expectation. Don't do that. I find that it's much more comfortable to say, this is something that I've been thinking about lately. What have you noticed about other kids in your grade or maybe the grade above? What are you seeing? What are you observing? How does it make you feel? What do you think you would do in that situation? How can I best support you to make decisions that are helpful?
Yeah. I can remember as a teenager questioning my mum on stuff that I'd already done, but I'd say, there was somebody at school who... So now my alarm bells go off when I hear my girls say, so-and-so, and I think,
Yeah. We've all got friends like that.
Yeah. Those close.
But here's a powerful question to ask your child if they come to you with that. You get to say to them, well, what would you say to your friend? Yeah. What counsel would you give your friend? What would you guide your friend towards? Yeah. And you don't need to let them know that you know who that friend is, that it's them. You just because the wisdom is inside them. Yeah. They actually know. And sometimes when we say it to them, it gives them something to fight against again. Yeah. Interestingly, once they come up with the right answer, if we say to them, yeah, I think that sounds wise, they're going to feel really validated. Yeah. But if we were to just dive in and say, well, I think that you need to tell them this, this, and this, they're going to start feeling resistance and they're going to want to argue about it. Yep. So it's so much better to say, well, what do you think? Let's empower them. And if they come up with a lousy idea or if they get stuck, it's important to ask for permission. Yeah. Do you mind if I share with you what I think? Yeah, okay. And then after you've shared it, say, how do you feel about that? Yeah. Because when you're getting permission, they let their defenses down. They're actually open to hearing what we've got to say. I use this, we started the conversation by talking about my 18-year-old, but I use this with my 18-year-old a lot. She'll come to me and she'll say, Dad, I've got this drama. And I'll say, wow, that sounds really challenging. What do you think you should do about it? And she'll say, I don't know what I can do about it. I'm stuck. I don't know where to go or what to do. And my response to her is, well, I have some ideas. I wonder if you'd be interested.
Yeah.
And she said, well, that's why I came to you. I'm like, well, that's okay, but I don't want to force my ideas on you. If I was to share an idea or two, would you be open to hearing them?
Yeah, okay.
And as soon as she says yes, I've got her permission. She's letting those defenses down. The resistance fades away. And I get to share an idea. And I watch that body language real careful. Oh, sorry, that was terrible. I watch that body language really carefully. And if I see her resisting, I'll point that out. I'll say, I'm noticing in your body language, it feels like you want to push against what I'm saying. There's something about what I'm saying that you don't like. And she said, no, it's fine. I'm like, no, seriously, tell me. But it creates a dialogue.
Yeah.
And it's not uncomfortable. It's very simple. There's something that you don't seem to like. I wonder if you'd share with me. What are you worried about with this?
Yeah. Fantastic. Thank you so much. I'm becoming aware of the time, and we've eaten through our 45 minutes. I know that people will want to look. Yeah, it goes fast, doesn't it? People will want to learn more from you and perhaps tune in. I know you've got a couple of books that people might be interested in.
I do.
3.
So my brand new book, which I'm very excited about, is called 10 Things Every Parent Needs to Know.
Yep.
Loads of stuff in there that will be so helpful. There's one chapter that's designed especially for younger kids, but other than that, the whole book is perfect for parents of teenagers, especially teenage girls. If resilience is an issue, best-selling book, 9 Ways to a Resilient Child, deals with the anxiety stuff, deals with resilience more generally, emotional intelligence. Wonderful book that is probably one of the best books in the country at the moment on resilience. And my first book was called 21 Days to a Happier Family. It's about being happy in your family, establishing good routines.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Justin. It's been it's wonderful to get your thoughts on all these different things. And I know that people will be wanting to find out more. So your website's probably the best place to start?
Yeah, happyfamilies.com.au is where you'll find everything that you need.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Great to be with you, Edwina. Thanks for the chat.
No problem. Bye.